Welcome to Inside the Champion's Mind, a show dedicated to helping you overcome mediocrity in the pursuit of being world-class in everything you do in life, love, and legacy. We're your hosts, Laurence
and Karen Tham.
Well, it's been a couple of weeks now since the Wellness Summit. That's the last time we've been able to actually share our stage together. It was the first time in a long, long time. And we did the last two recordings well before the summit. And then now we're post-summit. And how did you enjoy your experience?
It was good. It was really good. I probably didn't engage with people as much as I maybe should have, and that's because we had the kids with us. But it was an amazing experience for the children to be there. They got to go up on stage, and that was because they wanted to. And I'm really protective of the children. I don't want to make them show ponies. I don't want to have them do things that they're uncomfortable with. Yep. And so I was just really cognizant of that, of bringing them to the event, that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So we asked them, would you like to be on stage? And I think you did it in a very careful, nurturing way, that they got to go up just for a few minutes and spoke about stories that you've told them and things that were important to them. And then they had the time to come off the stage. And it was a great experience for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the experience is for them is to just kind of have a feel and not have the fear in the future of, standing in front of 900 people, 950 people. And I think I wanted them to experience it, but I didn't want to force it, No,
exactly.
It's about just letting them experience it if they wanted to. I asked them many times prior to the event and at the event whether they feel comfortable, and they were actually really excited to do it, and that was really critical. So.
I came onto stage, and I think Christian did a hapkido kick, and then Kaya did her normal curtsy and arm in the air, like power to you, and I was like
the personality shows up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. They looked very natural on stage, but again, I'm very cautious. I don't want them to be show ponies, and that's not what it's about. So so there was also some distance for me at the event as well, and letting them just be kids and letting them have fun and coming in and out of the event and taking them to do other stuff as well.
Yeah, no, it was a great event, and thank you for those who actually showed up there and being amongst the 950 people there at the Wellness Summit. It's one of our biggest. It's been actually the biggest event that we've actually ever had, and it was just an amazing thing. We did a lot of things that were different. That was your first summit, first time you exposed to all the podcasting stuff.
You hurt yourself.
I hurt myself.
You did hurt yourself.
Yes,
whose was it? The Robards, Tim Robards.
Tim Robards rings challenge.
So
Olympics.
The Bachelor was there, ladies.
But I won. That's the most important thing. I won.
He had this medieval contraption of rings, and the boys had a testosterone fest of who could do what, and Laurence won. But now every night he's rolling on his shoulder, and I said, I've seen him doing this for a while now, and I'm saying, why are you rolling on your shoulder so much? Why are you down on the ground? And he said, I think I've ripped something in my shoulder from the summit. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I ripped it, but I definitely crossed some injuries. But I don't know if it was actually from that or for something else.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No. How could it be?
But I want to say, let's move on to another topic. I want to say thank you for those people who actually made some comments over the last few weeks on the last two episodes. The one episode that got a lot of traction was the 104, which is on relationships. I can't believe the amount of people that actually made comments, and the feedbacks has been sensational. And I
almost feel like we should call it P2P.
What's that mean?
Props to peeps. Props to peeps. I'm going to try throwing that out there.
You are so white right now. And,
and I'm laughing because the light is coming on my face right now. We were saying before we started, like, I am just so white. And I said to you, Laurence, I am white.
Yes.
And I am glowing right now.
Yeah.
With happiness.
With happiness. Okay. Well,
it's a P2P. People who...
Big shout out to Leanne Anders for thank you for mentioning, commenting.
I think she sent us a lovely private message, which was fantastic.
And she's one of the, obviously another podcaster on the Wellness Couch, and I want to say thank you. And it was really encouraging to have other people comment about the show. And so let's get to it. Let's get to, this particular episode. What are we talking about today?
Well, obviously, we've talked about happiness, and we've talked about relationships, and it's all being a bit too positive.
Okay.
So I want to go the opposite way. I want to go about when things aren't positive, when you're negative, and the fighting happens. So this episode's going to be about fighting. And
this is going to be really fun.
Fighting relationships. And I purposely annoyed you just before this started to kind of get you on edge a little bit. And what I did, ladies, was I was spraying hairspray in here when I was doing my hair.
It's just not cool. It is so not cool.
And he wasn't happy because I said, no, it's got to look good. The hair's got to look good. And you weren't happy about it.
Yeah, it's a confined space. Like, let's face it, it's confined space here. And she's, doing her hair. And, it's a podcast. Okay, I understand there's YouTube video.
You started this whole YouTube video component to it, my friend. It is the curse you have to deal with.
Yeah, so I'm sure you ladies will be, who are actually watching this on YouTube, will comment on, how great her hair is. And for those of us who really don't care, then, we'll just carry on with our lives.
Because it's so important.
It is about a relationship, not about relationships, but actually fighting in terms of, do we fight or we don't fight? Because a lot of people have this perception that we never fight.
No, we don't.
And
we're perfect.
Yeah.
We are so perfect. Yeah, no, we do fight.
Yeah, we fight. We fight. And I think it's important to look at and analyze, do we fight and how we fight? Is it important to not fight in front of the kids? So on and so forth. I think those are really important discussions to look at from a life perspective. Not to say that we have this stuff together in the sense that we got all our stuff crap together, but I think it's really important to recognize how the importance of actually understanding why this is so important.
Well, it seems like there's actually a skill set to fighting. I was Googling it a little bit earlier on and it turns out, Laurence, and you won't believe this, I break a lot of the rules.
You break rules? You're not perfect? What are you talking about?
I don't fight by the rules. I've discovered there are a lot of fighting faux pas that I make. And I know this is going to be hard for you because you see me so perfectly.
So here's the thing, right? The challenge is that she expects certain things from me, all right? And yet she doesn't play by the rules.
No, I don't. But I don't think any woman does, really. If you think you've got us figured out, you've got another thing coming, because when we think you're going to jab left, we're going to go right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so where are we going to begin?
So let's go with that. Well, we talked about the hairspray incident already, bothering you. And I thought, it is hard. I think it's hard because we don't always, maybe as women, we tend to, or maybe it's just me, carry a lot of things in our little arsenal. So I will remember everything you've ever done.
Yeah.
And I will catalog it. Yeah. And then there will come a point that there will be the tipping point. And that's when the argument starts. And then I go into my arsenal of the last 20 years to remind you of all the grievances I have. And I've discovered this isn't good. And I brought a little picture because I know it's hard for you to know when I'm angry. And I'm thinking I need to give you signs. So this was me in kindergarten. Look at me. I look so happy. You can say I've already got the Asian persuasion preference. I've got little Asian dolls on my dress. But I was not happy because, check out the haircut. Yeah. I complained about my hair being brushed too much, and my mom cut my hair off. So there I am. Couldn't remember how to smile, so I wasn't very happy. And what was the other thing with it? That my dress, the people were all upside down. So I didn't like that. So back then, you would have had no problem figuring out if I was angry. Mm-hmm. But now I'm a much better actress, and I hide it, and that you won't have it. And I thought I could give you subtle signs that we're getting towards the tipping point. Like the first sign could be if I start walking around with these on. These are my Hulk gloves.
Yeah, I can see you turning green.
If you start seeing the Hulk gloves coming, that's a sign to you.
Back off.
Back off. I'm not happy about something. I didn't bring the Hulk mask because it ruined my hair and I just hairsprayed it, so I'm not doing that. So these could be signs for you. But, that's joking. Like in real life, we don't really give signs like that.
No, unfortunately, in real life, when something pisses us off, like individually, and I'm sure everybody feels that way too as well. When something happens, you usually feel it in a very emotional way. And so there's three parts of the brain. There's the logical brain, which all humans think that we function from. Then there's the emotional brain, and then there's the lizard brain. The lizard brain is more for survival, fight or flight type of state. But the thing is that we think we're logical, but when we are in a fighting mode, or when someone pisses us off, yes, right? You don't think from logic. You automatically move to a limbic part of the brain, which is the emotional side of the brain. And when you do that, you're not thinking rational. And it's usually then you go down to the lizard brain, which is the fight or flight state, which is when you turn green.
Yeah.
And that's a huge problem when it comes to fighting, because you get angry, and then you get into an emotional state, which then the other person, which is say me, I will, in reaction to your reaction, I'm going to say, well, hey, wait a second here. this is, it's just not all my fault here. And then I will rise up in my emotion, and that's when it begins, right? When we're both in...
Clash of the Titans.
Yeah, Clash of the Titans. We're in a total different rational mind, right?
Yes.
We're not in rational minds
No,
anymore.
we're not
We're
rational.
in emotional mind, and we're trying to butt heads, trying to figure it out. And what we have found in the past is that when you stay in that state, nothing really gets resolved, because we're just peacocking, I guess, in a way, to see who's right.
Well, it's trying to be who wins.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. If one person wins, one person loses. And there was a lot of things up on the internet about this, because it was saying, really, you're never going to have a win-win solution with that, and you have to get past that. You have to put your ego aside and actually want to resolve this, because if the whole thing is you just want to have a fight, bully to you, good for you, one of you is going to be a winner, one of you is going to be a loser, and that's actually driving your relationship further apart. So we did have some tips on it. I noticed one of the things that the tip said is that you should listen to your partner's views completely before giving input. Now
Why are you pointing that out to me?
No, I'm not, because I know this pissed you off the other day, because you were like, oh, I've got this great idea, and I've been reading about this, and I've been listening, and you started going into it all. And I was like, I cut you off midway, and I was asking you...
That drives me absolutely insane.
I was asking you questions. I'm like, but I don't understand, and I don't think that's true. And you got really pissed off with me, and then you wouldn't even finish telling me the story. So I don't know the end of the story on that one, which is a shame. And then when I was reading this on the internet, I thought, oh, that's not a good thing. So I will keep my thoughts to myself. I will catalog what I'm thinking until you're done speaking, and then try to then gently ask my questions to you.
Well, it's true, though. And it's because, oftentimes what we don't know is what pisses someone else off.
Well, it's important to know. You used to do stuff.
Yeah.
Do you remember? Do you know where I'm going with this?
No.
We'd go out with friends.
Why are we recording this?
And I have a highly imaginative nature. And sometimes when I tell stories, I don't know why, I embellish. Like, I just add details in that didn't actually happen, or it was stuff my mind thought. And then afterwards, when I'm retelling it, it would be way cooler, the story, if I tell it. And when we initially started... No, you don't get to talk yet. You have to wait. You'll piss me off. When we initially started dating and we'd go out with friends, I would recount my harrowing tales of whatever, and Laurence would be there, and you would interrupt me in my story and go, that didn't happen. And you would set the stage straight, and I would look at you with laser beam eyes, because that meant you were going to pay for this.
It looks good.
You would have been dead. And we had to have many conversations where I had to explain to you, it doesn't matter if it's not the truth. Only you and I know that. You cannot make me... You cannot do that in the middle of my conversations. And actually, that was a point on the internet as well. Do not contradict your partner in front of others if it will belittle them or make them seem silly. You do it on the side afterwards and just say, hey, you know what? I'm not too comfortable with you doing this, or try to tone it down a little, but not in front of other people.
All right. Well, just because it's on the internet, though, doesn't mean it's true, right? But
no, and everything's true on the internet. But I know you've learned that lesson, so it's never happened since. And I have tried to. Now people are thinking, I don't believe a word she says. She's going to be. I've really toned it down. I've worked on not doing that and embellishing.
Yeah. So for the reason why that bothers me, and this is where I think this is where the emotion starts to come out, right? Because the reason why in that circumstance is that for me is that I always want to tell the truth, because that's just how I was.
And I don't. The essence of my story is the truth. I just add in some theatrics.
Yeah, theatrics. Where to me it's like I need to make sure the facts are straight, and that but that's me, right? So therefore, in it, and this is what I mean by fighting is that my reality was that when you embellish a story, it's like, in my back of my mind goes, but that's not true, and that's going to affect my identity. Or our identity, right? So in my perspective, but in your perspective is like you're just adding theater to add, humor or whatever, and it goes, but that's important to you. But when I challenge you
in front of others, the key is in front of others. That is a red flag.
You see that as a challenged against your identity, because then it reflects badly on your identity. And so this is where the emotional states start to go out, because we just then go back to not rational brain. We start to go and going, hey, wait a second here, you shouldn't be doing that. Or then I go, but you shouldn't be doing that. And then that's when that's when the elevation emotion goes through. And the key about this type of fighting, right, if we want to arguments, if you want to call it,
it's called arguments.
The arguments is that we're both right. However, it's just that we're just right in our own consciousness or our own viewpoints.
It's from our own viewpoint. It's as you were talking about, that there could be two children that would reflect on their father, and one child could say, I had the most amazing relationship with my dad. He was so attentive. He was always with us. And the other child could say, Dad never did anything. I was neglected. And they both look at each other and say, we had the same house we grew up in and the same father. How do we view these things so differently? And I think that really does happen with relationships as well. How you view things with your filters is different to how I view it. And then how we personalize that. Because obviously, say that I had an issue with feeling insecure and you negatively spoke to me or did talk down to me, which you don't do, but if you did, and it was about insecurity, I am going to take that on board a lot more, because I've already got an issue with that. I'm already emotionally charged on this.
Yeah.
And it's going to affect me a lot more than it would in another issue that might be water off a duck's back.
Well, that's the thing with, if we're talking about arguments in a relationship, and that's where it stems from, right? We've known each other more than half our life. Like, we've known each other for 20 years, right? We're 41 now, so we're almost there, like in half our life. And what happens is that, but you had 20 years without me, right? So 20 years that you grew up in your family with your stories that you told yourself about your childhood, about who you are. And so did me, so did I. And I had those stories. And when we come together, we had to figure it out, right? So what mattered to me or what didn't matter to me, and what mattered to you and what didn't matter to you will start to clash.
Well, it's also too how your parents would have portrayed, how they would have raised you. Did they argue in front of you? Did your parents argue in front of you?
Yeah, they did. Sometimes, yeah.
And my parents did as well. And I think the way we as children view and observe relationships affects what we bring into our relationships as well. So definitely we would have, when we first started dating, and probably even now, we're bringing in our schooling in fighting and relationships and arguments with us, which is going to affect it. Yeah, and also the insecurities and all that stuff we just talked about, that's going to affect us. And that's how arguments begin, is because we don't know what's cut deep within you. Like, so we'll say insecurity. But we feel that person should know it because they've known us long enough and they should know better.
Yeah, and what is that, right? The 20 years together, you
still don't read my mind. I don't understand. I have said this a million times to you. Why can't you read my mind?
Yeah, and it's the same thing. Like, it's sometimes the smallest things. And the challenge is for us to actually reflect upon and goes, why did that piss us off so much? Right? That's the challenge as the person. Because in any argument, you can try to win. And we both know that that's never really going to solve anything other than the feeling.
Well, we know that I win. Yeah.
Well, that's not going to solve anything for you.
But it doesn't. It doesn't, though.
No, it doesn't, because no win-win situation.
It doesn't make me feel any better.
No, it's a win-lose situation. No. But then it's about, all arguments always have to end to a point where, we'll always come to an agreement, is that it always takes one person. The one person who's willing to drop their guard. And that's, I can think of a couple of situations in our 20 years where both of us just do not want to let go of the whatever stand we decided.
Are you saying we're stubborn?
Well, we are stubborn to a point of view. Like, I guess it's comparable, but I know that there's at least a handful of arguments where we're both stubborn to the point, and none of us want to give up our stance or position. We both feel that we're right, and I'm not dropping it. I want you to say sorry to me, and you want me to say sorry to you, but like, someone has to give. But the rule that we actually, I don't know if it's a rule, but it's
do we have this written down somewhere?
I think it's a rule that we actually made. I don't know if we actually made a conscious pact on this. I think we did. It's been so long.
Did we pinky promise it?
Yeah, maybe pinky promise it. But I think the rule we actually had for ourselves is that we would not, if at all possible, end the night in a negative state of hating each other, or not hating each other, but just having a bad feeling about each other. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what went on that day, we're gonna go finish that night and like end the night in a, whoever's right or wrong doesn't matter, but let's just can we move on so that we don't carry this over to the next day? Yeah. And I don't I can't recall. I think it might have been maybe one incident in the last 20 years that we would have gone, we were so stubborn that it carried on the next day. But I'm pretty sure of all the arguments that we had, we never carried on to the next day. So like there had to have been some point of resolve at the end of each day, and that was where one of us would decide to drop, or both of us would decide to drop that thing.
But I think that's the point, is that you have to put effort into that. Like, obviously, if you're arguing over something, one person feels slighted or feels upset about something. And I think some key points that I've learned is that, personally for myself, I don't speak up soon enough. And I will carry that around as a weight and a burden with me. Then more things happen, and more things happen till I reach that tipping point. And that's when you get the cascade. And really, I think that's quite often for a lot of people when they're fighting. The fight itself, it's not about that.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with that. Because it's been building up. So I think it's really important to try not to let that happen, and that's by having the open communication about how you're feeling. I think the second thing is, though, as you said, when you're in that fighting and angry mode, you're not really thinking that clearly. And, I think it's important to try not to be raising the voices and to try to listen to what the other person has to say, which is really hard because you obviously, or I'm not saying you, but that person at that time is obviously feeling like they haven't been heard, or something has happened and nobody cared to pay attention to it. So it's really hard to listen to somebody else when you're feeling slighted yourself.
Yeah, and when your emotion's high, right? And
you can't think clearly. Yeah. I used to run a call center, and that was one of the things, is that we dealt with complaints, and the people that called in were in a very, very heightened state. They weren't in a state that they could really listen to anything. And I think that's true about when you're in a relationship with anybody, be it your spouse or, your children, and there's some sort of a fight going on. It's really important to remember that it's almost like you need to take that step back. You need to kind of get rid of that energy a little bit so that you are in a position that you can listen to the other person and communicate in an effective way as well. Because it's really easy I think sometimes when we're with other people, we treat them a lot nicer. Complete strangers. We'll speak to them nicer. We're politer to them. And then our own friends and family, we kind of let our guard down, and we're not as careful with the words we use, which can be cutting. We're not as careful with our tone of voice, which could then internally cause somebody to be upset. And it's all these little slights, or these little put down. They do chip away. They chip away, yeah. They do chip away.
I think, why do we do that? And I'm just, the questioning as I ask myself that is, I wonder if it's because we tendencies to expect the other person to understand. They almost like expect that, what, me well enough that if I'm getting pissed off at you, that it's, that it's going to be okay because you always forgive me. Yeah. Like it's almost like this thing, that the expectation that you will always forgive no matter what I do.
Or it's almost too, I think it's that, and it's also too, is it cutting corners? Is it just like we're busy, we're time poor, and we just think, I don't have to work as hard in that area? And that's really the people you should be working the hardest with. The people you should be careful with your words and wanting to nurture that relationship and caring about it and not taking it for granted. Because the more those things start happening, there's a rift. And that rift gets larger and larger, further away. And then it gets really hard to start bringing that in and bringing it closer. And I think that goes back to, personally, I think it's really important that you don't try to carry those fights over to the next day. Because those rifts, it's hard. It adds up. It adds up and chips away. It's cumulative, and then people just don't want to bother anymore. And
I think that's how relation starts to drift apart, is because you kind of let things slide, or one person let things slide, and then the other person just keeps on going and then thinking that's okay. And when it's not okay, it was never okay with them, but I'll take it because I love them, blah, blah, blah. And then you just let these things continue, and then sooner or later you start to realize, like, why we're so far apart? Why don't we connect like that? Because the other person thinks, well, I thought you always enjoyed that, or you're always okay with that. But you never really were. But you were just kind of took it, well, that's what we have to do. My scary part about this is when you were saying this, and the thought that goes in my mind is how it actually affects our kids, right? In terms of, from two aspects. One is the role model.
Yeah.
If we don't fight in front of our kids, because sometimes, there's the feeling like, we don't want to fight. Like, there's a certain point, I think we
qualify. Do you know what I mean? If it's something really important that we need to say a lot of things, then that's not said in front of the children, because they don't need to feel that tension and that discord. And I didn't mean to interrupt you. But if it's a minor little thing, then I think doing it in a constructive manner in front of them, as I call them, discussions, it's important for them to see.
Absolutely. I think they need to see. Yeah. I think that we need to see that every relation has its disagreements and has those arguments and those validities. I think if it elevates to a shouting thing, that's when I think that we gotta we got to back off. I think you and I both had that agreement. It's like, well, not that we ever shouted at each
I
other.
don't think we've shouted.
But I think if we ever did, it's like, hey, this is getting a little bit too heated. This is where I don't think it's beneficial for the children. But I think they do need to see that discord. Because I remember there's a couple of times, and Christian would kind of be going, could you guys just calm down, just kind of, and then we'll be saying, we're not fighting, we're just arguing.
Having a discussion.
We're having a discussion. But I think sometimes they need to see see a little bit parts of that, because otherwise, if you grow up in a household where there is no fighting, and you think everything is perfect.
Well, that's what my mom did. In her household, she never saw, and I'm not saying it didn't happen, but she never saw her parents fight. And so when she entered the relationship with my father, who obviously, when they did have disagreements, it was really stressful for her. Like, it was really hard for her to process this. And there was a lot of the emotional baggage with that as well, of what type of relationship. This is not how a relationship should be.
Yeah. And
I think more so probably than the relationship that her parents showed her was very unauthentic. Because that's not what life is about. Like, we're not always going to agree. And that's good that we don't agree, because it makes us make sure that
it's a checkpoint.
It's a checkpoint, for sure. And you need that. Yeah. And to think that doesn't exist.
Yeah, I'm not always right. You're not always right. It's just that, finding that point. But what I was thinking about the children as well, from the second point of view, is how we argue with our kids. I think that it's been challenging for me. Oftentimes, not like that we argue, but like when we have disagreements with how Christian behaves, or with maybe something he did, or with Kaya, or how she, Kaya and I, like, we butt heads because I don't know what it is. This is that, with both kids, it's almost like we butt heads because I'm stubborn in certain ways and I think it's right, and then they don't like the way I spoke to them, or how I approached it, and then it's hard because as an adult, I know I'm right on this. I'm going to be standing on the ground, but like, this is the line I'm drawing, but there's also that part of me just going like, I need to be an adult here. But
I think that's where I'm a checkpoint for you on that, because when I see that going on and I see them getting frustrated because they don't want to be disrespectful sometimes in speaking back, and that's been something that losing my voice, that's been something that I've been teaching them as well, is that you also need to stand up for yourself, and you do need to have a voice. And when I see that going on, then I'll just say, you look like you're feeling frustrated right now. You look like you're not happy with what Daddy's saying. What is it that's bothering you? And can you see it from Daddy's viewpoint, what he's upset about? And can Daddy see it from your viewpoint, what you're upset about? Yeah. And kind of letting them see it. Like, I know sometimes I've said things to Kaya and then or Christian, and they've just said, Mommy, are you mad right now? And I'll say, no, why? And they go, it's just your tone of voice. And I say to them, thank you for letting me know, because I'm just really rushed right now, and I didn't realize that I was sounding very severe to you. Yeah. And that, because they then taking it on board that there's something they've done wrong. Yeah. And not feeling good about themselves.
Well, that's the hard part. Like, that's what I'm getting at. It's the hard part is actually being an adult about it. Even in our, like, say, arguments between me and you, or say arguments between my friends or whatever, which really occurs. However, like, arguments with kids, is that our responsibility for as human beings is to be able to kind of reflect back on yourself, because that's the only person you can really control. I can't control how you think. I can't control, your perceptions and your stories that you have. I can help you maybe influence it in a way, but I can't change it for you. You have to be willing to change. But the only thing I can do is reflect upon myself and how did I act there, And the first response is usually oh, I was right? But I'm talking about, like, how did you really act? Did you need to go there? Did you have to use that type of tactic or language or guilt or manipulation? Because that's what we do.
Well, yeah, we pull out all the stops there. Yeah, whatever shrapnel we can throw, it's getting tossed.
And that's what typically you do in any arguments. We pour on the guilt, right? You did that, and you make them feel guilty. You make them feel bad. And you knock them down.
And it's almost like that temporarily makes us feel better. Yes. But it doesn't.
Right. And that's why I think it's so important as a step here, is that we need to reflect upon it post-argument, or even during argument, if you can turn it off, when you can turn on that emotion, which is hard. Yeah. But can you dial it down and actually have a positive thought process and then go, was I actually really right? And was it true? And
is it worth it? Is it worth it to be right?
Yes. Yeah,
to exactly. Push it that much and make that other person feel so belittled.
And that's really difficult for most of us, because we all have that identity, right? Yes. To say and not to say that we're wrong. We don't want to say we're wrong, because that goes against everything that we believe in every fiber of our being. But I think a self-reflected person over time, knowing that when they could have done better or could have improved, will help you longer term and become a better person as a whole.
Well, you've said that. I think you said it on the previous podcast that often what we don't like in other people or that we find hard is a reflection of something within ourselves that we need to work on. And I know you've said that a lot of times to me. If I'll come back and I'll be like, oh my God, that mom, or she's been doing that, or this person. And it used to really piss me off because you'd say, what in yourself don't you like that's similar to that? And I'd be like, oh.
That's when the green gloves start to come
That's
up.
when the first green glove goes on.
And this is where I just kind of...
But as you say, when I get out of that emotional state and I think about it and I think, that is so similar to me. And it's really good, though, because then I think if I don't like that in other people, then I'm portraying this to other people and they're not liking that in me. How can I change it? How can I improve on that?
Yeah, and that's how we grow and that's how we learn. And that's where if you look at most of your, and this is just a discussion between us, but I'm sure if, the viewers and people listening to this podcast is saying, who do you actually have the most arguments with? Right? And then just think back, like, who do you have the most arguments with? And who are you always stubborn, like, never seems to just, bond? And I think for you in your relationship was, you always had this, relationship with your dad. Like, you always had this argument with your dad constantly. You know what I mean?
True.
You always
We're too
butted
similar.
heads.
We were way too similar.
But when you reflect about it, it's because you were too similar. You know what I mean? Like, you're so similar in the way you are and the way you approach things, is that you always kind of positioning and trying to see who's
the alpha
right.
dog.
Exactly. And you start to realize that, and that's when I realized that the most people I argue with is usually people who are exactly like me, and almost to a certain aspect. And when we argue, it's usually on a point that we feel very, very strongly about, and we're very similar to that point. But we want to say, well, I was the one who was right, and you're the one who's right.
Like, what color white should we choose to paint the wall?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's really important.
That's when I get pissed off and say, that looks exactly the same. Those 5 shades of white look exactly the same.
So I think to sum it up, really, arguments can really pull you apart, or they can really pull you together. And build a really strong foundation in understanding each other, what's important in your core values, and they are important in a healthy relationship.
Absolutely. And I can't say it better than that. I mean, one of the key things for me is about, I would suggest, is to look at yourself, maybe look at your past, arguments that you've had. Past arguments.
Good. Yeah.
And look at and find ways to really reflect upon how did you act. Not about the other person, because that's how we will always look at what the other person did or didn't do or should have said.
Change them.
They're trying to say, like, they should have said story. But what if you just put it back on yourself and go, how could I have done better? Was I really, really right? Did I actually care about that person when I'm arguing? I wasn't caring for myself?
And can I just throw in there, because I know we're finishing up, it's near the end. I think it's really important when you do that self-reflection is not to beat yourself up about it. Because then it can become a very negative cycle as well. And I think, sometimes when I feel like that and I go to bed and I'm like, that was not my best day with the children, I think tomorrow's a new day. How can I learn from this? And how can I improve it tomorrow? And I'm not going to carry that forward into the next day with me, because we're all human. We all make mistakes. And nobody's going to be perfect all the time. But it's how do you move forward from that?
That's a great advice. I think that is what most people, like, you've done this many times, and I want to extend this podcast a little bit here, but, you've done that plenty of times where you just beat yourself up because you didn't act, the way you wanted to, and that made you feel so bad, and you felt so guilty, and I always remind you, like, it's one day or one moment of their life, and you're such an amazing, amazing mom, and yet, don't let that one moment define who you are, and use that to change and live, and so that you can actually be better tomorrow.
Are you tearing up?
I am tearing up. I'm tearing up.
And it's not the hairspray.
It's not the hairspray. Anyways, I hope that you got a lot out of this. This particular podcast, I think, is so important. It's such an important discussion I think we need to have. I don't think we talk about it enough. I know we haven't discussed this until now. And so as you pull up those green gloves, I'm going to pull up my
fighting boxing gloves that we can have. This is great. This is for people who are driving. We've got our little props going again.
Exactly. Anyways, guys, I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I really want to say that thank you so much for the comments. It's been really, it's great great positive feedback on not only just for myself but for Karen too, especially when she's starting this podcast and getting the the courage to step up and actually share some of these stories within our lives. I think it's really important. But I really hope that you're getting something out of it. So please go to facebook.com Inside Champions Mind, like it while you're there, comment on this particular episode, and just tell us maybe does it resonate with you?
Does it resonate with you? Are there other topics you'd like to hear us talk about? Other interesting stories or pictures you'd like to see from our past? I'm happy to provide lots of information on Laurence.
No, there's
and share with your friends as well. So if there's people out there that you think would enjoy this, please share. The more people we can touch, the better.
Yeah, I think that's
that didn't sound
the main
very
thing.
good. The more people we can touch. I'll work on that phrasing. You know what I mean.
Go to subscribe to us on iTunes. I know some of you are watching this on YouTube, and great, but it will also help if you actually download the podcast and listen to it on the podcast as well. And comments and comment on iTunes, and maybe subscribe to it on iTunes, or comment wherever podcast show you're listening to. This has been Inside the Champion's Mind, a show dedicated to helping you overcome mediocrity in pursuit of being world class in life, love, and legacy. I'm Laurence.
And I'm Karen.
We'll see you in the next episode.